So good morning. I, Chair Shelley Bailey, call the Oregon Prescription Drug Affordability Board meeting of January 21st, 2026 to order. Melissa, if you could please call roll.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Present.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung.
Present.
Lori Hoagland.
Present.
Dan Kennedy.
Present.
Michelle Coder.
Present.
Chris Lehman.
Present.
John Murray.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Melissa. I now would like to welcome everyone to today's meeting. We have an American Sign Language interpreter here with us. Please use the Zoom controls to access the interpretation channel, and you can see how to access that visually here on the screen today. So now our agenda begins with a conflict of interest declaration, which are stated each month according to board policies. Do board members have any declarations of potential or actual conflict of interest? Have board members met with entities or individuals related to board activities? And have board members provided testimony to the Oregon legislature related to prescription drugs? Mr. Murray, I see that your hand is raised, so you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Bailey. Under advisement from the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, I declare potential conflict of interest due to my ownership of Murray Drugs Incorporated, 3 independent pharmacies in Eastern Oregon that have pharmacy services contracts with PBMs, insurance companies in the state of Oregon. Thank you.
Mr. Murray. Before I move forward with the approval of the minutes, do we have anyone else who wants to make a declaration? All right. With no more hands raised, we will now move to the approval of the 12/17/2025 meeting minutes by general consensus. I'd like to ask board members if they have any corrections to the draft minutes from the December 17, 2025 meeting. Okay, if there are no corrections, then the minutes are approved as presented. So I would now like to call on Sarah Young, the PDAB Executive Director, to provide us with a program update. Sarah, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Bailey. Good morning, members of the board. As discussed at the December meeting, we currently have a vacancy on the Prescription Drug Affordability Board. We posted that call for applications in December with a due date of January 30th. There is more information on the PDAB website about how to apply. If you are attending, we also sent a mailing list reminder and included an announcement about it in our quarterly newsletter last week on January 14th. So if you are attending today's meeting or watching the recording this month, please help share this opportunity with Oregonians who may be interested in applying for this board position. And reach out and contact me if you have any questions about serving on the board. We really need people with expertise and diverse perspectives to contribute to this work. So in December and January, the PDAB team has been focusing on publishing the board-approved 2025 annual report, which we approved at the December meeting, and we've published and distributed to the Healthcare Cost Growth Target Program and the Legislative Assembly as directed by our statute. The team has also been compiling additional updates and data for the 2026 preliminary drug and insulin lists. And we have been working on developing plans for outreach to Oregon patients and consumers in April and May. And I'll talk a little bit more about the details of that shortly. The drug price transparency team has been working on updates to the IREG reporting system, which is our online system that collects new drug reports and other price increase reports from manufacturers. And that team will be sharing updates with manufacturers and reporting partners as we work with IT to roll out the features. We've already rolled out the changes to the new drug reports, which should make those more straightforward to fill out and more straightforward for staff to interpret. The DPT annual price increase report feature is currently disabled in the system as we work on the steps to re-enable required annual increase reports. So if you're a manufacturer or stakeholder, stay tuned for updates there. And the DPT team is working on reporting templates for the annual reports from Oregon licensed pharmacy benefit managers and health insurance companies. As usual, the DPT program will collect information about prescription drug spending in those reports for calendar year 2025, which is, of course, the 2026 reporting cycle. Both the DPT program and the PDAB team have been reviewing our website and reformatting some of our documents to make them easier to read and easier to access with assistive technology. Our goal with this is to reorganize, not remove materials. And if you have any difficulties finding any of our website content, please reach out either at pdab@dcbs.oregon.gov or rxprices@dcbs.oregon.gov so we can help you find the new location for any material you're looking for. So, as I noted, we have a big outreach push coming up in April and May. We have scheduled community forums, and there is a save the date flyer about that schedule on the website. These forums will include 4 in-person events in community settings and 3 online forums. Plus, we're inviting community members to attend the May board meeting. Go to the PDAB website at dfr.oregon.gov/PDAB to see that schedule and to download a copy of the Save the Dates flyer. And please share this information with your constituents and stakeholders. We are particularly interested in hearing from patients. The forums will be listening sessions where we can hear from patients, caregivers, clinicians, and other interested parties who are part of the patient care or drug supply processes. And if you have actionable suggestions about how we can make these forums more welcoming, accessible, and engaging for Oregonians, please send your ideas to me and to the team. Of course, we can't do everything, but we want to make these as engaging as possible as forums for Oregonians, patients and consumers and others to share in this conversation about prescription drug costs. And a couple of more administrative things. I want to make a technical point about the 2025 reviews, which are on the agenda for vote today. As folks know, our administrative rule currently mirrored the previous statutory language and currently says that the board shall identify 9 prescription drugs that may cause affordability challenges for Oregonians. The change to the statute gave the board more flexibility in that you can designate up to 9 drugs, and that statutory change takes precedence over the language in the rule. We will be updating the administrative rule in the future, but for the current meeting, I just want to make sure folks are aware that the statutory changes are in effect. And that gives the board greater flexibility on the number of drugs they designate as potentially unaffordable. Also, as a process and technical reminder for the 2026 review cycle, which we are just getting started on, as part of our statute, the Oregon PDAB is required to review insulin drugs each year. And we start that preliminary list for the insulin with the Oregon All Payer All Claims Reporting Program data to give us the broadest possible picture of insulin use in the state. For this, to generate that list, we use Metaspan to identify insulin national drug codes and then matched those NDC codes to the 2024 claims data from the APAC program. Through this process, we identified the 109 unique NDCs that are listed in the insulin preliminary list with a record of use by Oregon patients. And I wanted to just remind everyone of that process again, because we use a different route to develop the insulin preliminary list from the preliminary list of other drugs, which is based on the insurer data reported to the DPT program. And the other drugs, we aren't yet including APAC data in that preliminary list. So hopefully that disambiguates a little bit where the two different preliminary lists are coming from. And of course, staff and I are ready to answer additional questions about those data as the board starts to evaluate and debate how to move forward on your 2026 reviews. So please let us know if you have any questions. And with that, Chair Bailey, I will turn it back to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sarah. This portion of our agenda is related to the public comment period for general public comments, which are posted on the board's website. The individuals and organizations that we receive written public comment for are as follows. Daria McGrew from Pharma, Erin Callahan from the Diabetes Patient Advocacy Coalition, Anne Murray from Bristol Myers Squibb, Carl Schmidt from the HIV and Hepatitis Policy Institute, Marianne Cooper from Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oregon, Tiffany Westrich Robertson and Vanessa Latham from the Each Pick Coalition, Rachel Dolan from Eli Lilly and Company, Rainier Simmons from CAN, and Carissa Kemp from Sanofi, and we did receive 2 letters from Sanofi. The board also received 2 requests to speak. I will call on those individuals who signed up to speak and ask them to state their name and organization. Each individual will have 3 minutes to speak. As a reminder, the board will not deliberate on issues or requests during this time. First individual I have on my listed is Daria McGrew from Pharma. Daria, if you're here, welcome. You have the floor and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning, Chair Bailey, members of the committee. Daria McGrew on behalf of Pharma. Thanks. First, I want to recognize the amount of work on behalf of the staff and board members leading up to the vote today. As we have said before, we do remain concerned about persistent data inconsistencies, calculation errors throughout the board's affordability review process. We urge the board to continue to make improvements in transparency and documentation as stakeholders still lack clarity on some of the analytical methods, assumptions, and application of statutory factors. We respectfully reiterate our concerns regarding the scoring rubric introduced in 2025 and its structure and weighting methodology. We continue to ask for consistent and reliable framework for data validation, including manufacturer review prior to public release to address ongoing discrepancies in data issues. Second, I want to address some of the comments in previous meetings and potentially today in the presentation regarding the use of the Orphan Drug Act. The ODA has been highly successful bipartisan policy transforming rare disease research by offering vital incentives like tax credits, market exclusivity, and regulatory support. Before the ODA, only 10 rare disease treatments were available per decade. Now, over 750 FDA-approved orphan drugs exist. While more than 30 million Americans still live with over 7,000 rare diseases, most 90% still lack approved treatments and rely on ongoing scientific innovation that the ODA encourages. Its significance should not be underestimated in your deliberations. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. McGrew. The next individual I have on my list today is Rainier Simmons from CAN. Rainier, if you are here, welcome. You have the floor and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you and good morning. And I'm having technical difficulties. I'm using my phone today. I want to make sure, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Rainier Simons, and I'm speaking today on behalf of CAN, Community Access National Network, with a couple of brief comments. We'd like to reiterate our concern that several antiviral medications used to treat HIV are on the 2026 drug review preliminary list. The past board discussions resulted in the evidence-based exclusion of HIV cost reviews due to data showing they do not pose affordability challenges to patients or the state. Additionally, other state PDABs have not included HIV medications for cost review, recognizing they do not pose affordability challenges and to ensure no decisions are made that could harm access, which would have adverse effects on continuity of care. Maintaining viral suppression is a matter of life and death for patients living with HIV. We're also concerned about the ongoing discussion parsing distinctions about different categories of orphan drugs concerning their exclusion from review. It appears that the Oregon statute explicitly states that a drug designated as an orphan drug by the FDA for a rare disease or condition is not subject to a state's prescription drug affordability review without exception. It does not differentiate between indications or whether an orphan designated drug is also used to treat non-orphan conditions. Administrative rules that appear contrary to the law are concerning. Also, rare disease drugs are high cost by nature due to the unique research and development process required to make them for small patient populations. They don't have therapeutic alternatives, biosimilars, or generics. Thus, the utility of including them for affordability review is unclear. Thank you for all of your ongoing work and your opportunity to speak this morning.
Thank you for being here today. We are now moving to the portion of our agenda related to the 2025 drug review. Today, the board will conclude the 2025 drug review. The board will vote to identify up to 9 prescription drugs and at least one insulin product that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare system or high out-of-pocket costs for Oregon. Pursuant to ORS 646A.694, the board will vote on each of the 23 drugs on the subset list. Drug reviews are conducted according to ORS 646A.694 and OAR 925-200-0020. The board reviewed the 23 prescription drugs and insulin products in July, August, September, and October, with continued discussion in November and December. Reports for each drug under review are posted on the PDAB website, and links are included in today's agenda materials. Courtney Whitlock, Senior Policy Analyst, is here to help us begin this discussion. Courtney, welcome, and you have the floor.
Good morning, Chair Bailey, and good morning, board. Thank you. I don't have much for introduction regarding this section, just in the sense where, as Chair Bailey mentioned, we've had multiple months to have meaningful conversation and dialogue regarding the impacts of these drugs on the Oregon healthcare system and patient out-of-pocket costs. I did want to provide the opportunity for any board members that may have additional clarifying information of any of the drugs under review. And if there's no additional conversation that is needed, I think we can just go ahead and roll over to a vote. But I need to lean into the board members if you have any additional information on any drugs or insulin products prior to the vote. I guess hearing none.
Well, Courtney, I do have a statement I wanted to make before voting, but I just wanted to
Perfect.
make sure my colleagues had the time and space to do or say anything first that they might want to do. So before I make a statement, does anyone here from the board have anything that they might want to say? Okay, well then I guess I have the floor. So before we vote, I did want to briefly acknowledge the importance and complexity of the work before us today. What we are doing here is meaningful, and it's also inherently constrained. My personal decisions today are based on the information that is publicly available to this board. Most of us listening here today know that the pharmaceutical supply chain operates and how it operates in practice. For example, some drugs on our list that are used by thousands of Oregonians are acquired at prices that are very different than what is presented here to the board today through programs like the federal 340B program. And these pricing dynamics are invisible in public data. This conversation also extends far beyond Oregon. Tomorrow, the Ways and Means Committee will hear from the CEOs of the nation's largest insurers on the rising costs of healthcare. And I believe personally that context matters. So much of what we evaluate as a board ultimately reflects plan design. So today, from my perspective, we are doing the best that we can with the information available to us, while also recognizing that there are additional factors influencing affordability that we are not able to fully assess at this time. And so that's all I wanted to say before we move forward with voting on the 23 drugs and one insulin product, or insulin products, sorry. And Courtney, are we going to have language on the screen related to, there we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
So starting just in the sense of how the review process went, the slides are just kind of conducted within the groups they were originally identified in. So starting with Vraylar, a motion needs to be made, a second, and then Melissa will take the roll call. Is there any other questions before somebody makes a motion? All right, hearing no questions, if one of the board members would like to make the motion. Mr. Kennedy, I see your hand up.
Yes. Okay.
Motion for Vraylar. I would like to move to identify Vraylar as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Michelle. And Melissa, call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
Yes.
Dan Kennedy,
Aye.
Michelle Coder,
Yes.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
Yes.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. We have rationale from prior meetings of for the drug Vraylar being identified as a concern. Does any board members want to provide any additional rationale? Since we did have some indications that are a little bit different than last month's discussion from board members of selecting the drug. And if hearing none, we have prior commentary that we can utilize. I just want to make sure that as I develop the report for the legislators that we're capturing the rationale for individuals.
Courtney, Dr. Hartung.
Yes, Doctor.
So we will be able to review this report before it goes to the legislature to make sure
Of
it's okay.
And
Yes, you
Courtney,
have
thank
to-
you for confirming that the discussion that we had in our previous meeting, that information from individual board members will be documented as additional context for the votes. Thank you.
Yes, of course. All right, well, having no additional context regarding Vraylar, we will move on for a motion for Entresto. Is there a motion on the floor? And Mr. Kennedy, I see your hand up again. Oh, and you're on mute.
Yes. I would move for Entresto to be identified as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in the state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second on the floor?
I'll second.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, Melissa, will you take roll, please?
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, board. I guess then going on to Ajovi. And Dan, is your hand still up from last time, or is that
No, but I can still do it. So
okay?
I need to lower my hand, I guess. I would move to identify Ajovi as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in the state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
And is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Lori. Melissa, can you call roll, please?
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
No.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, board members. Thanks, Melissa. So the next drug up is Emgality. Is there a motion from a board member? Thanks, Dan.
Sure. I would move to identify Emgality as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
And is there a second?
I will second.
I heard Michelle, but I heard somebody else. So I think Michelle's got the second. So Melissa, with Michelle as the second, can you please call roll?
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
All right, thanks, Melissa. Going on to Nortec ODT. Mr. Kennedy, take us away.
Yes. I would move to identify Nurtec ODT as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate that. Melissa, can you please call roll?
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
Yes.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Melissa and board members. On to Umbrelvy. Mr. Kennedy, can you please make the motion?
Yes. I would move to identify Ubrelvy as a as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
I will second.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate that. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
Yes.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
Yes.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Kennedy. Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails. 3 yeses and 4 noes.
Thanks, Melissa. Advance to Trilogy. And again, Dan, I think your hand's up, or is it still staying up and you're just going to make the motions for us?
I'll just make the motion.
All right, make
Okay.
the motion.
I move to identify Trilogy Ellipta as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694. Seeing if I could do it in one breath, I did it. So
Good job. Maybe have a second on the floor, please.
I'll
I'll
second.
I heard John before I heard Melissa or Michelle. So John has the second. Melissa, please call roll for Trilogy.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
no.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Melissa. Right, a motion for Eliquis.
Okay. I move to identify Eliquis as a drug that may create affordability, can't say that word, affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Lori. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Melissa. On to Xarelto. Dan, do you need a break or?
No, I'm good.
All right, please make the
Okay.
motion.
I would move to identify Xarelto as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Right, thanks, Melissa. On to Cosentyx.
Okay. I would move to identify Cosentyx as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
I'll second that.
Thank you, John. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
Yes.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
Yes.
Chris Lehman,
Yes.
John Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
Yes.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Melissa. On to Creon.
I would move to identify Creon as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
I'll second it.
Thank you, John. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
Yes.
Dan Kennedy,
No.
Michelle Coder,
Yes.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, board. On to Jardians. Mr. Kennedy, please make the motion.
Yes, I move to identify Jardiance as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
All right, is there a second?
Second it.
Thank you, Lori. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
No.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Melissa. On to Manjaro.
I move to identify Mounjaro as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in the state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Michelle, thank you. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. On to Ozempic.
Okay. I move to identify Ozempic as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in the state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
No.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Melissa. On to the next drug, Rybelsus.
Okay. I move to identify Rybelsus as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in the state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Great, thank you, Melissa. On to our last one, Trulicity. Mr. Kennedy for the drug.
Yes. I move to identify Trulicity as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in the state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
All right, is there a second from board members?
I can
Second.
second that.
I got Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
Yes.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
Yes.
Chris Lehman,
Yes.
John Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
Yes.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, board. That got us through all of the drugs. We will do insulin in just a moment. All but 3 failed. The ones that were identified to that may create affordability challenges to the healthcare system and patient out-of-pocket cost is Cosentyx, Trulicity, and Vraylar. There's no objection or any other discussion on those 3 drugs. They will go forward as the primary drugs for consideration for our report. All right, I see lots of head nodding, so this is good. Let's go on to the insulin products. Mr. Kennedy, you've done such a great job leading the way. Do you want to continue or do you want somebody else to take motion? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I'll continue.
All right, on to the insulins.
I would move for Basaglar QuickPen as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in the state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
No.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Melissa. All right, Dan, you got us for
Okay.
insulin glargine.
I would move that we identify insulin glargine YFGN as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 6468.694.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Michelle. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
No.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Melissa. Mr. Kennedy, Lantis.
Yes. I would move that to identify Lantus as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Second.
Thank you, Michelle. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
All right, thanks, Melissa. Dan, Lantis,
Yep.
Solstar.
I would move that we identify Lantus Solostar as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay, thank you, Ford. Semglee.
Okay, I would move that we identify Semglee as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
No.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Melissa. Go ahead, Dan.
Yes, I move that we identify Toujeo Max Solostar as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
I second.
Michelle, Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
No.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
No.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Yes.
Motion fails.
All right. So Dan, onto the,
Okay,
yep, Solstar.
no, that's fine. I would move to identify 2JO Solostar as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
I'll second that.
Thank you, John. Melissa, please call roll.
Lori Hoagland,
No.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
No.
Chris Lehman,
No.
John Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
No.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Yes.
Motion fails, 4 noes to 3 yeses.
And that was the last of the insulin products, and there was no yeses. Glad I was kind of prepared for this. I appreciate all the honest voting, but we do need to reevaluate some of the insulin products that were voted on. In last month's discussion, Lantus Solstar had 5 discussions from board members of concern that it may impact the healthcare system and patient out-of-pocket costs. Tajuro Max Solstar had 2 board members indicating it may have a concern. So going back to,
And Courtney, for the record, related to my votes, the one that I intended on having the yes for was the 2JO Max Solostar.
I think we caught that one as
We
well.
did. I was just saying that was the only one I had intended on voting yes on. I know it didn't,
Okay.
doesn't change anyways, but just for the record, it was the 2JO Max Solostar that I wanted my yes identified. The rest were no.
So on 2JO Solostar was a no.
Correct. It
correct,
was the
Chair Bailey?
max. It was the max
Okay.
that I intended on
then
voting
That
yes. on.
changes that count to 5 noes and 2 yeses. Thank you for
Thank you.
clarification.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that for the record.
All right, thanks.
Sorry to
Shirley.
interrupt, Courtney.
No, I mean, we're gonna have to kind of decide if we need to do another vote or have some discussions around the insulin products. In the sense
Courtney?
where we do need to at least identify one. And again, we did have pretty strong rationale in last month's discussion. John, Chair Bailey, Chris, Dan Kennedy, and Lori all indicated some concern for Atlantis Solstar. So if there's a change in your no vote for this one, you want to discuss the rationale, or is there any other drugs that the board members would like to have another opportunity to vote on again?
Courtney, I would be open to adding Lantus Solostar. I was listening to the feedback. I watched the videos from my colleagues during the discussion, and I heard some good information from Michelle that had kind of helped me modify some of my opinions related to it, but I would be open to maintaining my yes perspective related to Lantus Solostar. Because it is my understanding that we do have a statutory requirement related to one insulin product.
Yes.
Dan, I don't know
Chris?
if your hand was up to speak or if you were. Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think in light of the fact that we have the statutory requirement, Courtney, for me, the Lantus Solostar would probably be the one that I would be most apt to vote yes for. Though as we all, I think, expressed in the last meeting, I think the prices around insulin over the last couple of years have changed, and we're looking at old data. But as to meet the statutory requirement, I think Lantus Solistar would be the one that I would be open to voting yes to.
Okay.
And
Thank
Mr.
you.
Lehman, I'm glad that you referenced that kind of new data versus old. I mean, that perspective also did change my initial opinion on some of the other drugs from the original drugs I put forth in December versus what I put forth now, because I did listen to my colleagues and some of their perspectives related to market changes. And so I did have a similar thought process related to the other drugs. So I hear what you're saying related to that.
Well, then is the board comfortable with making another motion for this or any other insulin products?
I will motion that go ahead, Lori.
Yes. Same thing as Shelley just said. I was just gonna jump and make the motion.
Okay, so you want to, so do you want to make the motion, Lori? Since
Oh, sorry.
it's on the screen, but Melissa changed it.
I move for Lantus Solistar as a drug that may create affordability challenges for the healthcare systems or high out-of-pocket costs for patients in this state pursuant to ORS 646A.694.
Thank you, Lori. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Michelle. Melissa, please take roll.
Lori Hoagland,
Yes.
Dan Kennedy,
Yes.
Michelle Coder,
Yes.
Chris Lehman,
Yes.
John Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
Yes.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Alright. Thank you, board. We at least have the one. The other insulin products, excuse me, sorry, I'm fighting cold. From last month's discussion, all had very low numbers from other board members' conversations. So I think from the very constructive conversations from the last few months, the vote is appreciated. So with that, oh, yes, Chris, I see your hand up.
Trying to get off mute there, Courtney. Sorry. I wanted to say thank you to the staff, you especially, Courtney, but also Chair Bailey, for getting us to this point. It has not been easy for any of you kind of navigating all the questions and our strong desire. I mean, none of us take these decisions lightly. So wanted to thank you for providing all the data and all the work that you guys have done. And quite frankly, thank all the public who've made all the comments and that we have taken very seriously to get to this point in terms of this vote. Chair Bailey, I really appreciated what you said earlier about how we're doing the best we can with all the information we have to try to do something new for the state of Oregon to help make drugs more affordable. And I think this is a really big moment for us that we should celebrate.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Chris, where it says, take a moment and celebrate the moment, because we have, for the most part, succeeded in our statutory requirements of the 2023 drugs for the 2025 review. And the drugs identified are Cosentyx, Trulicity, Vraylar, and Lantus Solistar. So staff will start developing a report for board members to read and approve. We will lean over in just a minute to some recommendations, conversations for those drugs. If there's any sort of concepts that you feel that legislators can lean into to help with policy, and especially as they have the short session this year and then gear up for next year's long session. So with that, congratulations, board. You've identified 3 drugs and 1 insulin product. So Chair Bailey, I will send it back to you for the next agenda item.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I think I will be just giving you the floor back, Courtney, and referencing that we are now moving to the portion of our agenda related to any recommendations to include in the 2025 report. So Courtney, you have the floor.
I have too many windows open. I had asked some board members to provide concept, or actually I asked all board members to provide options for concepts to send to legislators with any other drugs that were identified. And I really appreciate the comments that we got back. I had to kind of bucket them in 2 different categories, and then I also added some additional things, and I'm really sorry the slide deck is not pretty. I put it together early this morning, but I'm going to share my screen to start the conversation around the first bucket of concepts. And these are provided by Chair Bailey. And so, Shelley, if there's anything that you feel you want to clarify as I kind of talk through these points, please help support the conversation. In the sense where I will be sending out the links that Chair Bailey also provided for other states, but I really just wanted to get the conversation going. So basically, bucket A is the policy options that relate to the drugs that were selected. So they're more aligned with applying to any of those drugs. And I think it was Dr. Hartung that also mentioned in last month's meeting, no mid-year, formulary changes for stability and those kind of things. So these 5 items, and Chair Bailey, you may be better equipped to
Yeah, no,
I'm
happy to share a little bit of context. I actually spent a lot of time on that because it was hard. The task I thought that was at hand was like how to make potential policy recommendations similar to like the cap the copay on insulin that would be more drug specific. So obviously when you're getting down to drug specific or what drugs I thought might present possible affordability challenges that we may vote on this week, that was a kind of hard task to try to narrow it down to the drugs that I thought we might vote on. So, related to the specialty tiers, I do believe that like the state of New York has some information related to how a payer can or cannot kind of restrict specialty tiers. So I did provide some of that information related to New York State that Courtney passed or will be passing on. So I thought that was something that, for patients that are on a specialty medication on continuous therapy, having kind of a cap on the cost sharing or kind of copay for some of the specialty medications, I thought would be a concept that might lead to improved access, because even if a medication is quote unquote covered, if the consumer can't afford it because of the copay, I felt that that was something that we might want to discuss. Again, kind of number 2 goes into number 1 a little bit, and that's related to how a drug is identified as specialty. This goes back to access. When sometimes payers identify drugs that are specialty that actually typical retail pharmacies would be able to safely distribute to an Oregonian. So I did want to make sure that for any medications that don't require REMS or don't require REMS that local pharmacies could do, that we might talk about how we can make sure that specialty medications are more accessible to Oregonians. Related to charitable pharmacy access, I did kind of dive into the charitable pharmacy laws that Oregon has. And what I did find is that there are other states that actually make it a little more visible for consumers to realize where they might be able to access charitable pharmacies. So charitable pharmacies are different than like an FQHC pharmacy, and North Carolina and Iowa have like forward consumer facing URLs where people can learn how they might access special or charitable pharmacies. So I also thought that was something that could help certain, communities here in the state. And then I did provide some suggested language, but leaned into something I heard Vice Chair Dr. Hartung recommend related to formulary stability, so that there wasn't kind of changes mid-year, because I recognize that that could be very disruptive to individuals kind of related to medication access. And then number 5, related to the social vulnerability index score, I know that Social determinants of health are something that we're always considering when we look at affordability and access. And so, one of the kind of frameworks that I came across was how you might use social vulnerability index scores, so that there may be specific like counties where the out-of-pocket cost or the copay may be different or kind of more affordable for the communities that would have a higher social vulnerability index score. So I know and this would be for non-ERISA plans, but I know I just shot my colleagues with a fire hose here, but I was trying very hard to think of things that we might be able to provide to the legislature for consideration on how we can help work to improve affordability.
Yes, thanks, Chair Bailey. And I appreciate the additional context to the bullet points and stuff like that. But Dan, can you see your hand up?
Yes. Hey, Chair Bailey, excuse me. I had a quick question. When you were talking about the social vulnerability index, you were talking about applying that to communities, or is that correct? It would be applied to communities or individuals?
So I don't want to suggest that I'm a policy expert, because we all here know I'm very clearly not. But my understanding based on research is that some of that is like zip code dependent. So kind of like how on like Med-D, how age is a determining factor, zip code is like a determining factor in how it's like priced out for what someone pays for their plan. I was trying to lean into that type of concept. So I think, again, I'm sure we will receive feedback if I am wrong, but that it's more zip code dependent. So I don't know if you can get it all the way to the individual level. Clearly that would be most optimal, but looks like Vice Chair Dr. Hartung may have some visibility or insights to help here.
Oh, I don't have nothing on this in particular. I just had, since we're kind of discussing ideas, I just had a thought. So like, I can wait.
Nope, you have the floor. That was my best answer.
Okay, so I don't know what are in the other buckets. But one other concept that we might want to consider from a policy standpoint is related to copay maximizers and accumulators and kind of things that basically, oh, they're there. Okay, bucket B. Never mind.
I think to lean into your comment though, related to that, I do believe we have some laws in Oregon related to them, but I can't say that I'm an expert on what those laws are. Is there any staff or anyone that would be able to provide any insights on what we already have on the books for the state?
I think we need to dig into that a little bit more. I can't recall just off the top of my head, but I think you're right. There's been discussions for sure around this concept. Not to say that we can't provide some sort of information in our report to the legislators that might help clarify why this is an important way to address these affordability concerns. So going back to slide 1, is there any other discussion or questions that board members have for staff or Chair Bailey kind of around these concepts, or anything else that they feel we can add? Otherwise, I think it's a great list.
That was a lot, and I recognize we can't overwhelm in what our concepts might be.
And I think the intention is to get the ideas out there and then have a more fruitful conversation on some of the ideas next month in order to provide a vote either at the end of the meeting or the first part of March meeting, where we can just add it into the finalized report like we've kind of done in the past. Because again, I know that we've made recommendations for the annual report, but those are kind of different in the concept. If there's anything that the board members may know of the drug that were selected or the class of drug that were selected, just to help legislators kind of have some concepts to what they can work with within the policies.
And Courtney, again, not to suggest I'm an expert, but it looks like House Bill 4113, we do have a law for state regulated individual and small group plans related to copay accumulator programs. This was passed in 2024. Again, this is just my online search. So just for additional context for Dan. So it was passed in 2024 and it restricts the use of copay accumulator programs and references that the prescription drugs must count toward a patient's annual deductible or maximum out of pocket. And it looks like it was set to take into effect in 2025. But again, not an expert, but that's my quick searching.
And again, I can vet those out more accurately.
And then I see a lot on just whether or not different plans have been abiding by that. And it looks like patient experiences kind of vary. But again, that's not feedback we've directly received as a PDAB.
Just before we leave bucket A, Courtney, can I ask a quick question, Chair Bailey?
Yeah.
Of course.
With that social vulnerability index, could you clarify a little bit, because you're saying that Medicare's using a social vulnerability index to change prices of Part D plans based on your zip code? I hadn't heard of that. I didn't know there were. I've heard of income based, but not zip code based.
Yeah, that was just my recollection of things from years back. So it's likely, I would say that's more income based. So I don't want to misrepresent what I was saying, kind of trying to tie it to how kind of Medicare is doing it is, if we can't do something that's like, I was trying to just find a model that might be doing something similar. So I do not want to misrepresent, for the record, what is going on related to Medicare Part D, because I am not a policy expert related to that. But some of the states that I did find information related to the social vulnerability index score and how that might relate to prescription drug out of pocket was related to the state of Massachusetts and their Connect Care program. So that was just one data point that I found that I was doing more research on. And then there is a website for the Social Vulnerability Index that I'm sure Courtney might be able to provide if we had the interest in making anything like that. But I am not here to represent or say that all sorts of entities or states are already doing this. That is certainly not the case. It's just a concept that I came across that I thought could be interesting when I was trying to tie things kind of to specific drugs.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying.
All right, so hearing no additional comments or feedback on bucket A, I'm going to move on to bucket B. And this bucket was primarily provided by John. And so John, I'm going to lean into you to kind of help facilitate some of the conversation. And what I kind of gathered from this recommendation is more around the area of further study or investigation that may be able to be applied into the data sets that we review. But John, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm happy to hear or have you discuss with the board members what the concepts were based around.
Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, you're right. These are more policy. However, I was thinking as we were talking about bucket A that there is one way that I might suggest that we apply this to the drugs that we just designated as possible affordability challenges. As far as I'll just focus on PBM conduct and rebate dynamics. And while we haven't suggested in bucket A capping copays, for example, this is part of what I turned in. Let's see. In 2024, the Federal Trade Commission filed suit against PBMs for inflating the list price of insulin drugs. Investigators found that PBMs systematically excluded insulins with low list prices in favor of higher cost, highly rebated versions to benefit themselves without reducing the cost of those drugs to patients. The agency's findings dovetail with testimony the CEO of Novo Nordisk gave before the Senate Help Committee in 2024. He noted that insulin products had been dropped from formularies when his company lowered its prices in the past. Without reform, PBMs could do the same with low price capped insulins. Now, where I'm going with that is that why don't we suggest that drugs that are listed as possible affordability challenges, the legislature delink the payments for medicine prices for those drugs that are listed as possible affordability challenges. If they were to do that, it's not making a sweeping change in the state of Oregon. It's only suggesting to the legislators that they implement a new basis for PBM reimbursement plan dynamics that exclude profit based on high cost medications, such as the ones that are possible affordability challenges. If we were to suggest that, it would be a trial run. It would be something that the legislators could do, not making a sweeping change, but they could see what kind of effect it has had or could have. Let's see. A USC Schaefer Center for Public Policy and Government Services study has suggested that removing PBM incentives to favor higher priced medications could save the states billions of dollars. If that's a possibility, why not test it on these drugs that Oregon assigns as a or PDAB suggests are possible affordability challenges? That would be one concrete step that the legislature could take to test the waters and see if this theory really is true. It would turn a lot of things upside down, but it could possibly save the state hundreds of millions of dollars. Thank you.
Mr. Murray, just from an operations perspective, how would you see the claim adjudicating if you're delinking? What do you think the cost basis would be on one of these drugs? So like I was thinking of like one of the drugs on our list that may present affordability challenges may also currently be identified as specialty, which I know like NADAC doesn't always have cost basis for specialties, but how would you just operationally, how would you see that happening if there were 5 NDCs or something? How do you think that would work? Like, would it be, what type of acquisition cost benchmark would be used for the claim to adjudicate? Because I can see how you could add the professional services fee. I'm just trying to figure out what the cost basis would be in this scenario.
Yes, I would hope that the cost basis would be truer. Whatever is determined would be the cost basis. Hopefully it would be more true to what the actual manufacturer is charging for the medication and not inflated or deflated or rebates.
So just what the pharmacy's acquisition cost is that's sent in the claims during claims adjudication.
Yeah, I don't particularly have an answer for that other than the fact that I would hope that it's more true to what the manufacturer is actually and more transparent than what is happening now. So I guess I don't have a great answer on that.
No, I'm just thinking through it. So I'll ask you one other question then. How would this be different than the concept of a UPL?
The price charged by the manufacturer would not be mandated by a government agency. It would be governed by market dynamics.
And okay, so then it's just the payment side of it that would be in alignment with whatever's going on in the marketplace at this time.
Right. We keep hearing of price decreases. For example, I had a difficult time voting for some of these insulin products that in the current marketplace now, granted we had to vote on 2023 data, but a lot of these affordability challenges were corrected either through the MFP or from the IRA, whatever it is, or voluntary caps from the manufacturers, voluntary price reductions. So I would hope that those kind of things would come out if the market between the manufacturer and the patient wasn't manipulated so heavily.
No, I see the difference. That is a helpful explanation. Thank you.
Appreciate the conversation, John and Shelley, and kind of the insight on this. Does any other board members have anything to add or any other questions? regarding bucket 2, I can show you bucket 3. Yes, Mr. Kennedy.
Oh, I just had a quick question for John. It seems that vertical integration is a little bit outside of our wheelhouse here. It seems that's more the responsibility, I think, of the Federal Trade Commission, and obviously they may not be doing their job very well. But I'm wondering what your thoughts were on vertical integration and whether or not we could have any effect on that at all.
Right now, Dan, no, but should the legislature grant the PDAB authority to look into some of these market dynamic distortions, that's my main intent. So I must admit that maybe some of my suggestions didn't particularly apply or don't particularly apply to our example here of what we needed for these drugs. But I still think they're important to bring up in the course of our discussions. So Dan, no, I don't think we can do a lot about vertical integration right now. If the Federal Trade Commission can't do much about it, I'm not sure what we can.
Thanks, John.
John, the only thing I would say about that, and I should have been researching while you were talking on it. I do believe there are some states that have at least limited. I can't even think of the state where like you can't own a retail pharmacy outlet if you're also the TPA/PBM. So I will find that because but I do, to your point though, about that, I do think there are states that have figured out how to operationalize within what they can do some things like that. And I'll find those states in here in a minute.
And Chair Bailey, I think you're correct on that. I think some states have prohibited PBM-owned pharmacies.
Yeah.
And so that makes sense. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, that would be so I believe. Yes.
Well, we'll see what our friend the internet says. Arkansas. Yeah. I think Arkansas is the most advanced, at least from what I recall reading in some of it, but it does seem, and it has been challenged legally, of course, but it also looks like states like New York, Indiana, and Louisiana may have similar bills that are either in process. So Arkansas was passed in 2025, but it looks like New York just has it introduced. Indiana passed it. Louisiana. So anyways, I don't want to, but I do, I guess that could be the use case of what the bullet here references.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I broke them up into kind of two different buckets, right? I mean, these are concepts that may need a lot more investigation, a lot more study, and how they would apply. And again, working with board members and, for their concepts and how to create the language, if any of these apply, would go into the report that would be sent in March to the legislators. So I really appreciate the conversation on this. Yeah, John, go ahead.
I guess I would just comment to Chair Bailey about the specifics of how the program would work. The MFP was instituted and became active on January 1. To this day, to this moment in January, our pharmacy has not received payments for the difference in those drug costs. So the fact that programs are put into effect without everything worked out happens every single year.
Well, and Mr. Murray, I'm glad that you referenced that for the record to everyone here, because I am familiar with the MFT and Beacon, and the challenges that you are experiencing boots on the ground today is exactly why I was so strongly against UPL, because it will impact access. So again, that's my own personal opinion, but the workflow challenges that have been presented due to the MFP through the MFT is a nightmare. And that was my fear of what would happen related to UPL. I know that's a very strong comment, and I'm only speaking for myself, but personally, I'm very sorry for all the pharmacy providers that are experiencing this and the Oregonians who these challenges may ultimately access. So, Mr. Murray, I'm very glad and grateful that you referenced that here today. And again, that applies to all drugs that are part of the through Medicare, which the new iPay for 2028 will come out here in February. So there'll be even the more drugs for 2028. So for all the pharmacy providers out there going through this feels a lot like Med D in 2004. And I'm just very sorry as an Oregonian for the disruption this is having. And that is in part, it is exactly why I was so fundamentally against UPL. One of the many reasons. Which is why, Mr. Murray, I am personally a little concerned about the recommendation you made about these specific drugs. And it's the operational piece, it's the operationalizing of it that I'm concerned about. Not the conceptual perspective of trying to lower drug prices, but the how and who the how impacts. Mr. Murray?
I guess I would say that the benefit, even for me as a pharmacist, who will be at risk for the operational specifics of of my suggestion, the benefits to me as a pharmacist and as someone who's trying to watch out for patients and their total cost when they walk up to my counter, the benefits of this possible savings of delinking PBM profits from the cost of the medication far outweigh. And so I would be willing as a pharmacy to take the risk in this case, because I think it would fundamentally change the marketplace in not only in Oregon, but in the nation. So.
Thank you.
Dr. Hartung is here now.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I just want to echo what Chair Bailey said in terms of the disruption to the pharmacy reimbursement system with the implementation of the maximum bar price. But I mean, I just also want to know, we're early on in one of the largest upheavals in the Part D program ever. And so like within the first month, and I understand that pharmacies are very kind of concerned with the complexity and making sure that they're made whole with these reimbursements. But it's still really early. And this is a big, what's been done in Medicare is huge. So I think we need to give it time before we form really strong opinions about its pros and cons. So.
Michelle, I see your hand up next.
Yeah, I want to, anytime we're talking about making policy recommendations on, tiers or copays or payment reform, is really taking the time to study other states that have done this. I guarantee you the insulin copay caps are being passed on to consumers in another way. And so, and I'm thinking about this, it's January and the reset of plan years, patients' deductibles. I'm seeing deductibles of $100,000 for some patients. So that is merely catastrophic coverage. And they are on the hook for 100% of their drug costs. And I want us to be really cognizant of the fact that costs will shift to consumers or pharmacies in different ways. And so I want us to be really careful in those discussions.
Thank you, Michelle. I do, while I hear and very much appreciate and conceptually don't disagree with the statement from Vice Chair Dr. Hartung, I do want to lean into the fact that while it is important to wait and see and learn and kind of see at a system level what a lot of the federal changes are doing, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that pharmacies are being used as banks in the process, because the pharmacies are paying the high price and they are waiting for the chargeback through the Medicare facilitator. So what this is, again, this happened in 2004 with Medicare D. Now, I obviously see that there was lots of benefits from Medicare D when it was implemented, but in the meantime, the funding mechanism for this is pharmacies. And I felt this is what would happen in Oregon if we had had UPL, but it happened in 2004. So far, it's happening again, right? We are the 22nd, and yeah, I think 21st. And so, you know, their prompt pay laws, a lot of pharmacies have not received those payments yet. So again, I don't disagree with what Vice Chair Dr. Hartung said, but I just know it's how to bridge from point A to point B. And right now that's the pharmacies. They're used as banks, and you have to wonder how long the pharmacies will be able to do that. But Mr. Murray, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is just a comment that yes, I am concerned about the MFP and the implementation. And yes, it is early, and I suspect things will level out. My concern is the number of pharmacies that won't be able to bank this until it levels out. They will go out of business. I am in favor of any program that eventually lowers the cost of medications to patients. I do have, you know, a concern that one of the letters that was submitted in public comment from an insurance company lists only manufacturers as the cause of all problems in the drug distribution system, not even mentioning PBMs or the middlemen in this whole process. So everything, in my opinion, that we do need to study thoroughly. You're right. I agree with Michelle. My suggestion about delinking might be radical, but I think it needs to be looked at and talked about and at least explored. So I think it would be a tremendous benefit. Thank you.
Well, thanks, board. I really, really appreciate the conversation and, you know, kind of the concepts of the pros and cons for each of these sections. I think some of it needs to be vetted a little bit more and what should be applied into the report.
So Courtney, how would we do that? Like, in what timeline do we have? Because I don't disagree. Like, I was going to ask you if we wanted to vote on each bullet as a board. I recognize these are broad bullets, but what do you see as the mechanism for the how, so that we aren't pushing a tremendous amount of work onto staff, but that we're also including potential concepts for legislators? But if we don't vote on it, how do we add those in a way that's reflective of kind of the board's opinion? Do you have any ideas? I'm trying to figure out how we get from what we talked about here to what may or may not be included in the report.
Yeah, so again, you and John provided email concepts, and I just took out the highlights to have this conversation. Going forward, I will submit those written, like the detailed information out, so that all of the board members have the same information, and then you will be voting on them individually.
Okay.
And again, like I said, the board can have a pretty structured conversation next month on these, and then either vote at the end, or we can even push it to March. As long as the language is all agreed upon, then we can just add it in to the final report, and we can just do the vote, you know, with edits as approved, as we've done in the past. So
thank you for that clarity. I wasn't sure what the path forward was related to that, so that is helpful.
Yeah. Chris, I see.
Courtney, are we required? I'm not questioning the utility of it, but is it required when we do this part that we submit recommendations around ideas, or is this something we're doing because we think it's a good idea?
It's a great question. So our statute does indicate provide recommendations if needed. And so no, it's not, and we don't have to if it's not what the board chooses as a whole. But
I just wanted to understand that,
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
it was a simple yes or no. So it's not required, but I 100% get the utility of it. And then I just wanted to voice my agreement with what Dr. Coder said earlier. I mean, we're not all of us are pharmacists, not all of us are I don't know, medical professionals, but we've all been trained to want to really thoroughly investigate something, especially if we're going to send it as a board as a recommendation to the legislature. So I appreciate you sending us the more detailed information so we can investigate it and have a more thorough discussion next time we're together.
Yeah. And again, sorry that some of this will be a kind of a quick turnaround, and board members will need to do a little bit extra work outside of board hours, but it's the only way to make this as meaningful as possible to include into the report that's submitted in May or March, sorry. John, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to endorse the idea of submitting recommendations. Simply handing the legislators problems, I don't think accomplishes much, especially on such a complex issue. If there's some way that we can provide them with guidance on something that we believe and have investigated or talked about or discussed, voted on, that would be helpful for them to actually implement, instead of just handing them a problem.
Thanks for that, John. I did also kind of put together just some things that I have seen. And this is just have another other bucket. And again, sorry, it's kind of all squished together. Did it really early this morning, and just to kind of throw out some concepts. And basically, if any of this would also apply, such as, you know, kind of limiting prior authorization or step therapy for chronic disease medications, and then kind of process through what that would be like. You know, require PBMs to disclose the rationale for formulary replacement discussions, since we don't really collect that kind of information. You know, enact protections preventing PBMs and or insurers from removing a drug from a formulary. And then, you know, again, PBMs and insurers to apply to manufacturer rebates, discounts, and price concessions directly at the pharmacy counter. These are things that I've heard as suggestions from public comments and in letters and through conversations of board members. So I just wanted to capture those and kind of put them in an other concept category. Again, I know this is all fresh, and we do have until, you know, probably next month, pushing into March, to really vet some of these concepts. But if there's anything in here that also maybe applied as a recommendation to address some of these cost burden concerns. Is there any questions from board about how these were developed or came up with? Because otherwise, then I'm going to just send all this with as much information as I can for y'all to review and look at, and then have a more fruitful conversation with vote either in February or March. Dr. Hartung, I see your hand.
Because this is going to be yoked to these 3 or 4 drugs that we just voted on, in a sense, I'm wondering if, and many of these concepts are pretty broad, and you know, I guess John made some comments in terms of like almost piloting some of these concepts on these 4 drugs, which I think makes sense, but wonder if we just want to also be cognizant of the, you know, focusing our recommendations on these, you know, these specific drugs, not therapeutically, but just, you know, these are the drugs that we have determined to be affordability challenges, and here are potential levers that can be pulled to address these challenges in a focused way, you know, rather than kind of some of these broad, very broad-based concepts, which I think, you know, we just submitted an annual report with probably, I don't know, 8 or so recommendations as well that were kind of broad. And so I'm worried just about diluting our message and the impact of our recommendations by just peppering the legislature with even more like broad and somewhat vague recommendations.
Yeah, and again, because I didn't get very many recommendations from board members overall, yeah, this is just a conversation piece. So if none of this works, I'm going to hold it on till next annual review recommendation report. You know, I have no problem holding on to them either. But I think with bucket A and bucket B, the conversation has been very meaningful, and I think we're probably leaning to those and how to kind of structuralize bucket A as much as possible. And Chris, I see your hand up.
I just have a broader question about, I think UPL has been on everybody's mind since we started this process. Is this a time when we're saying these are the meds that we both feel have affordability challenges, to list some of the concerns that the board may have around UPL so that they understand why we're submitting different recommendations instead of just the list of the meds? Because I think over the last year and a half or 2 years, I think we've all individually expressed some concerns. We've definitely heard from stakeholders in this process about their concerns around UPL. So is this a time for us, when this report goes to the legislature, to bring that up?
I think I'm gonna let other board members maybe respond to that. Since I saw a bunch of hands fly up. So Lori, I'm gonna.
Lori, I saw your hand first.
Well, looking at this other category really speaks to me from the patient end of the experience when they get comfortable with the medicine and then it's pulled from the formulary and they're faced with the dilemma of, do you pay out of pocket for it or do you take a risk when you have chronic illness and you feel vulnerable all the time. Anyway, so, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of the formulary, the PA piece, and make sure that we include that.
Okay. Shelley, John, are you?
Yeah, no, I mean, my perspective in hearing what Chris was saying was, I only referenced UPL because I was trying to identify how it just mechanics was different than what like Mr. Murray was saying. So I only use that I was just in my own head trying to figure out his perspective on why it was different. And he made an explanation that made a lot of sense to me. At least my own opinion is that we already provided the legislature with the report that we were statutorily asked to do, that we gave to the legislature related to the UPL, and they decided not to move forward with that. So from my perspective, that work has already been completed per our statutory requirement. So that's, again, I was not trying to create confusion with that. I was just trying to figure out how to link one concept to another in my own head. So I apologize, but that was my own perspective related to UPL. But Mr. Murray, I see your hand.
Yes, I would like to echo Dr. Hartung's comment about peppering them with too many ideas. I understand that my recommendation, for example, of delinking on the medications that we're saying are out of affordability challenges might be a stretch. However, I really think that if we were to give them 2 to 3 ideas, concrete ideas, that the legislators could consider, it would be beneficial. I don't really want to go into big policy discussions with them on this. We already did supply the report. So I would say mine might be a stretch. I'd love to see it in there, but I also understand why the board might not want to do that. So.
Thanks, John. And again, these are just the concepts for conversation. And Chris, as I kind of shake your head, so I feel like you got your question answered.
Well, I mean, I think what I heard from Chair Bailey is, no, we've done that work. They know the concerns about the UPL, and so these are alternatives to a UPL, basically. Is that what we're saying, Chair Bailey? Like, here's some ideas that we could do to improve affordability of these medications that are not a UPL?
I think that my thoughts would be in alignment with what you expressed. I was just trying to think of something similar to cap the copay for drugs that we may, and I anticipated we may, vote on today. And I was just trying to find some sort, to Courtney's kind of previous comment about not just providing a complaint without like a recommendation. So you're right, just trying to find some sort of concepts that we might empower them with, so that we don't just say, here's some drugs that may present affordability challenge, but here's some drugs that may present affordability challenges, plus some concepts you might want to consider. You already reviewed the UPL concept as a legislature and made your own decisions. Here's some other ideas that we thought we might want to present to you. So I guess that was a very long-winded yes to your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, leaning into what Chair Bailey was just saying, I mean, everything that's presented here is just, for conversation. I think that again, we'll go back to the vote. Wherever the vote needs to be, either next month or the first part of March, to get to have the most meaningful conversation on to send something to the legislator, so that we're not just showing a concern and not any resolution behind it. But Dan, I see your hand up.
Yes, so I'm wondering if we're capable or able to do so, might we also prioritize our recommendations to say this is the top concern and this is what we think would have the highest impact to address affordability, or is that too granular?
No, I think again, that's a lens we can look at, and these are just being shown for the conversation, and then we'll have a much more meaningful conversation, because I'll be able to provide you with all the information that Shelley sent and John sent, and you'll be able to have a little bit of time to research what either one of the concepts on the buckets would be for you. So again, the conversation will probably be much more meaningful next month, and then whether you haven't, it's basically just going to go for a vote. So your vote will tell you what the highest priority is. And John, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Courtney, I'm going to send you the USC Schaefer Center for Public Policy that report that I mentioned earlier about delinking. If it would be helpful for other board members to see that, or some information about it, please.
Yeah, and whatever other information you want to send regarding any of the stuff that you provided to me, so I can send it on, would be great. All right, well, I appreciate the conversation. I will be sending this stuff to your state emails, so please be looking out for them. Chair Bailey, if there's nothing else that you need from me, I will sign it back over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Courtney. We are now moving to the portion of our agenda related to executive session for legal advice pursuant to ORS 192.660. The board will now adjourn to executive session for legal advice pursuant to ORS 192.6602F. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the media are directed not to report or otherwise disclose anything said during executive session. All other members of the public may not attend. The public may stay here in the Zoom room, and the board will return to open session in approximately, well, it says 15 minutes, but we've also allocated 30. So maybe check back in 15, but if we're not here, our agenda says 30 minutes. So no decisions will be made during executive session, but at the end of the executive session, the board will return to open session and welcome public feedback. So Melissa, if you can help facilitate moving all the appropriate people into executive session, I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, so Oregon PDAB has concluded our executive session, but I do want to make sure we add time and space for the break that we referenced on the agenda here. So it is currently, we'll say that it is 10:20 a.m. Pacific. So we are going to take a 5-minute break, and we will adjourn at 10:25 a.m. Pacific. So we will be back as a board, or excuse me, we will not adjourn. We will be back at 10:25 a.m. Pacific. Thank you. Well, good morning. I would like to welcome everyone back. Melissa, if you could call a quick roll call so we can ensure that we have quorum to proceed, I would appreciate it.
Yes, Chair Shelley Bailey,
Present.
Vice Chair Dan Hartung,
Present.
Lori Hoagland,
Present.
Dan Kennedy, come back to Dan, Michelle
Sorry.
Coder.
I'm present.
Oh, Dan, thank you,
Yeah.
Dan.
I was on mute, sorry.
Okay. Michelle Coder,
Present.
Chris Lehman,
Present.
John Murray.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Melissa. The board will now begin the 2026 drug review. At the December meeting, staff presented the preliminary list of prescription drugs and insulin products for the 2026 drug reviews based on commercial insurer reporting from calendar year 2024. The board discussed the list in December, and staff brought back revisions for the board to review today. The preliminary lists are posted on the board's website, with links included in today's agenda materials. Courtney, you have the floor to help start us in this discussion.
Thank you, Chair Bailey, board members. I'll share my screen. Try that again. All right, so I hope everyone's getting used to me at least starting these conversations with the introduction of where we're at in our roadmap. So we're here in January. We did the vote today. Congratulations. We had the discussion around the recommendations, and now we're going to start diving into the 2026 preliminary drug and the insulin drug list reviews. Following up for next month, we're going to take the drugs that are on the subset list and the drugs that were voted on and write a draft report to be sent to the legislators. And we'll continue the discussion around the recommendations to include into that final report. And also continue to have this discussion around the preliminary list in February, ensuring that we can have a final vote for the subset list in March. Again, also approving the reports and the recommendations in March. After the subset list is approved, it goes to our carriers for additional information that helps the data analysts to help provide them dashboards and other information for discussion of the drugs. And we'll be sharing all that hopefully by the June board meeting, depending on how quickly we can get that analysis written up. And as Sarah had mentioned earlier, during that time, we're going to be having a public outreach section in April and May to kind of touch base with communities around Oregon of the drugs that are selected on the subset list. Before I jump over to another presentation, I just wanted to level set with board if there was anything else regarding the kind of roadmap that we are following on our agenda items and process through the work we're going to be doing. All right, seeing none, I'm going to stop sharing and move over to a more fun discussion. Thank you for your patience. Try that again. All right, included in the material packet were some slides regarding the Prescription Drug Affordability Board's authority to review drugs with orphan designations. And today's presentation is meant to help clarify the board's authority to review drugs that have those designations for orphans. And there has been understandable confusion around whether an orphan designated drug automatically exempts review from PDAB. And in short, it really doesn't. And I'm going to walk through that through this presentation. So this presentation will walk through the federal law, the Oregon statute, and the Oregon administrative rule to show how they fit together and to clarify when a drug is exempt and when it is not. And the goal is to ensure that the board is acting consistently with its statutory authority and legislative intent. So, going on to the next slide here. So at the federal level, orphan drug designation is granted by the FDA to encourage development of drugs for rare diseases and conditions. The designation provides incentives such as exclusivities and tax credits, and importantly is regulatory and development classification. So federal orphan designation is not addressing pricing, affordability, or state drug review authority. It is simply identifying a drug or an indication of a drug as targeting a rare condition. The Oregon statute specifically addresses organ drugs under ORS 646A.694. It exempts drugs only for the indication that has received an orphan designation. So this designation is critical, but the statute does not exempt the entire drug product simply because it has an orphan designation for its use. So the exemption is the indication specific, not drug wide. And so equally important is what the statute does not say. Oh, I think I got my statutes backwards. And what this, the reason why I put this, I apologize, I slid this in here, but the reason why I showed the screenshot is to allow board members to know that when we go and we determine if a drug has an orphan indication, we use the FDA website as the guidance, and the FDA provides how the agency grants orphan designations to the drugs, and then that authority comes from how the Orphan Drug Act, which includes the 21 U.S.C., that is the language that's in our statute. So when we look up the drugs for the orphan designation that goes into the preliminary list, it's all cumulative of how we identify a drug that has an orphan designation. And then from there is where we start diving into the orphan designation is exempt under our statute 646A.6942. And it does not exempt the entire drug. It is exempts, it just prohibits review of the non-orphan indication. And in this review for the, in the preliminary list, you'll see where it says yes, no for an orphan indication. It provides a list of the indications and then how many indications were identified. Not all indications were listed under the open cell because some of them had 9, some had 10, some had quite a few. So I tried to indicate if a drug had multiple indications in the, for a quick glance. Okay, so sorry, back to what the statute does not say, and equally important is that the statute does not state that the drug with only orphan designation is entirely exempt from the review. So it does not prohibit PDAB from reviewing drugs with multiple indications, and it does not limit PDAB's authority to consider affordability impacts related to non-orphan uses of a drug. So then the administrative rule was adopted to clarify how the statute is applied in practice. So OAR 925-200-0020, I also often refer it as the -20 or the 20 rule, makes explicit that drugs with orphan designations may still be reviewed for non-orphan indications. So this rule aligns with the legislative intent and ensures consistent application across drugs with multiple indications. And it's helpful to view this through kind of like a legal hierarchy. And so the federal law defines orphan designation, but does not restrict how states can utilize it as an affordability review. Oregon statute provides the additional language indication for the specific exemption. And then the administration rule is the one that clarifies how the exemptions are applied operationally. And so all three are consistent and point to the same conclusion that PDAB does retain the authority over non-orphan use to review. So in practice, this means if a drug has only one single orphan indication, it may be fully exempt from PDAB review. If a drug has both orphan and non-orphan indication, PDAB may review the drug with non-orphan uses. And this ensures that the affordability concerns tied to broader utilizations are not excluded simply due to one orphan designation. So this matters because many high drug costs with orphan designations are widely prescribed for non-orphan conditions. And a blanket exemption would create a loophole with undermining the purpose of what the PDAB statute provides the board to do. And so the legislator's intent being to protect access for rare disease patients while still addressing affordability challenges where broader systems can impact those that already exist. And so in summary, federal orphan designation does not automatically exempt a drug from PDAB review. Oregon statute exempts only the orphan designated indication, and the administration rule clarifies that application. And so PDAB retains authority to review non-orphan uses in alignment with its mission to address affordability challenges. And with the end of my slideshow, I'm going to turn it back to the board for any questions that you might have. And that, otherwise, I'm going to open up the spreadsheet and we're going to start reviewing the drugs for review.
And
All
Courtney,
right.
just to level set the intention for this next part of the meeting, the intention is for us to discuss the drugs and essentially narrow the subset based on the criteria that we would like to look at for this review period. That's the framework for the remaining portion of this meeting?
Yeah, so last month staff presented the draft of the of both the prescription drug list and the insulin product list. And so we're going to spend some time kind of covering the, what's in the sheets, how to kind of drill down. We're not looking really for any finite discussion or any specific decision making right now. I just want to show kind of what we've added from our last month's discussion and get you familiar with how to start utilizing these for February and March in order to drill down to a subset list. And please remember that we do follow our rule 925-200-0010. I also refer to that often as the -10 rule. And I was trying to pull that up, but my system is not working. I'll pull it up in just a minute, but I do want to start sharing with you the list. And I'm going to go over the prescription drug list, and then I'll have Heather come on and kind of chat through her updates with the insulin product list. Let me have a minute. All right, we have a cover sheet, and within each of these links, it jumps you automatically to any of the additional tabs. Within the history document, we will be documenting any changes within the preliminary lists as we move forward with any updates for the drug review, and also including any notes specific to any significant changes of the document. The definitions are all definitions associated within short terms, abbreviations within the preliminary list itself, and then an applicable URL if it has one, just to provide additional resources of where the information comes from. And also followed with the sources. So a lot of our information comes from CMS and the FDA and various FDA website information and Medispan. So we're providing this additional context just in the sense to show like how much we look into and we vet to apply the information into the start of the preliminary lists. Last month, we did not have the WAC highlighted in the report. We were kind of challenged with how to look at WAC and decided to go with the NDC with the most utilization in 2024. Noting, please, that the total spends, so all cost amounts are cumulative across all NDCs and across all carriers that reported on that drug. But we pulled the highest utilized NDC to get the WAC. And then once the subset list is determined, that WAC number will be split into package cost and unit cost like we did in the previous packages. But for the preliminary list, we felt that this was just kind of the most streamlined way to do it. And then highlighting any drugs that had 5% or more increase in a WAC change from 2023 to 2024. I kind of mentioned it in my presentation that this standardly we've always had the yes no column here for if it had an FDA designation. If there was a designation, that designated condition is identified, and then how many they are listed, but then for a quick cite, it shows how many conditions are associated with that. Additionally, for this updated sheet, we included the license application, not just if it was brand or generic, but if it was an NDA, a BLA, or an ANDA. And then we broke out very specifically instead of a yes, no, as in the last year's review, we split out the number of therapeutic alternatives, equivalents, and biosimilars for that drug specifically. So those are kind of the new columns that we've added in for this year's review. And I want to give the board just a few minutes to digest all this information and ask me any questions that you may have before I ask Heather to come on and go over the insulin list. I'm hoping that everyone has been familiar enough with the spreadsheets that we use. Oh, I did notice this year I also included the if the drug was on a previous prelim list or subset list, or if it was not on a list, so we can the board can look at filter out drugs that have already been on the subset list from previous reviews, or if the drug is a consistent repeater across preliminary lists. And then each of the drugs is identified with the number of carriers that reported it, the percentage out of 11 of them, if the list type was on the greatest increase, most costly, or most prescribed, and then the additional information of number of prescriptions, number of enrollees, net spend year over year. And as a reminder that the prescription drug information is based off of net cost from reporting carriers, and insulin information is based off of APAC, which is gross cost information. So any questions or additional feedback that the board would like to provide staff on kind of how the list is set up?
Courtney, before we go to the insulin list, is your intention that during the remaining part of the meeting, we will be going back to this list and discussing it more?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that the board is familiar with both lists.
I just wanted to ask. Okay.
Yep, know what the changes are and stuff like that. And then once Heather's done kind of presenting her highlights of the insulin list, we'll jump back over to here and we'll start talking about concepts.
Thank you.
Yeah, that the board might use to drill down. All right, if there's no other questions about this, I will stop sharing and ask Heather to come on to share her documents and talk with the insulin products for you. Thanks, Heather.
Okay, give me just 1 minute. Are you all able to see that? The insulin spreadsheet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So like the preliminary list, we have a cover page here with directed links that will take you to the different pages. Document history, as outlined in the other, is the same idea to track the changes from one posted version to the next. Any notes that might be relevant for consideration as you review these drugs. Definitions, we've included any, this may differ slightly from the regular RX list. This would be those that are targeting or related specifically to insulin sources as well here. And then we have 2 data tabs, NDC level and the drug level. The NDC level will give you here, and you'll see that we have 109 NDCs specifically, and you'll see repeated values for the proprietary name, given that this is at the NDC level. Manufacturer, non-proprietary name as provided by our clinician. We do have also provided by the clinician the number of therapeutic alternatives. This column J says basically yes or no if it was included in a previous drug review. If the board would like the further distinction of subset and preliminary list as provided for the RX list, we can definitely do that. As you go out to the right, there are more NDC specific information types, such as the orphan designation, the FDA priority review, 18 months, dosage form, strength. We do have for this, because it is at the NDC level, the package size and the package size unit of measure and package quantity based on the NDC. And as you go further to the right, you'll see there's a year of the last WAC change prior to December 31st, 2024, or as of 2025. And then what is that specific date here in column X? As you go on, we do have, because again, this is at the NDC level, there is a WAC price for that NDC that is from the end of 2024. And from that, you will see branching out into pharmacy, medical, and total. The pharmacy and medical, and then the total claims are basically a summation. So the lighter blue columns are summations of the previous 2 for pharmacy and medical. Again, as Courtney mentioned, these values are based on APAC and they are gross. And they are derived by looking at Medispan for all of the insulin NDCs and crossing those with APAC to determine the values associated with those for utilization in the year of 2024. As you come out to the end, you'll see that we've broken down the coinsurance deductible and copay, and then a calculated values for enrollee out-of-pocket, total out-of-pocket, and then payer paid per claim and per enrollee, and out-of-pocket per claim for each enrollee, and then the out-of-pocket total per enrollee at the end of this. And again, this is for the NDC level page. There's also the drug level page, which right here you will see that it has insulated the names and removed the NDCs here. So they are collapsed within a specific drug name if the NDC bears the exact same drug name. Non-proprietary name, again, provided by our clinician. Also the subclass provided by our clinician and the number of therapeutic alternatives. Column E gives you a count of the number of NDCs associated with each of these drugs, and it will relate back to the NDC level page. You will not see WAC on this page or NDC specific details because this is collapsed based on name, not NDC. From here, you will go on and see in this collapsed state, the same columns that you saw for APAC values based on utilization for pharmacy and medical claims, all the way out to the per in claim and per enrollee cost for both payer and enrollee. that is pretty much the overview. I may have gone a little fast, so if any of the board members have any questions, please let me know. Or if there is something that you would like to see that you do not currently see in this list, please also let me know about that. Are there any questions for the board based on the insulin drugs at this point? Okay, well, with that, I'll pass it back to you, Courtney. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Heather. I appreciate it. And again, I know that we're throwing a lot of stuff at your board members, and hopefully you've had at least the last week or so to become familiar to some extent with the lists. The nice thing about looking at the insulin products is it's the capacity of what the drug will also be looking like when it gets down to the subset list. Because again, that's where we're going to start drilling down to where the NDC level information. So the hope is to have the drug selection done by March. If we can get it done sooner, that'd be great, because the sooner we can get it over to the commercial carriers, then the quicker we get it back for a better analysis. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I think this is where we're going to kind of start diving into potential concepts to look at for identifying how you want to look at the drugs for review this year. Last year, we did have the initial removal of the orphan drugs, and there was the removal of any drug that had generics and a few other components. Each drug year does not have to be the same. That's why it's pretty open. We did just do the trend reporting report, and there may be drugs on that list that the board may be interested in also looking at through this report. And as Sarah had mentioned at the beginning of her statement, is that we are now under a new statutory requirement to identify up to 9 drugs. So we don't have to look at such a wide net of drugs for this review. You have a little more, so trying to meet a check mark number, you have more flexibility in how you actually want to look at the review for the subset list. So I want to just kind of pass it to the board to start the discussion of, I know you finished the 2025 review, made a great vote, and now you're jumping right into the 2026. It's kind of a big day. But hopefully you still have a little bit more brain power with you to at least somewhat of a conversation over the next hour or so regarding how to look, how does the board want to look at the drugs this year? Yes, Dr. Hartung.
Just kind of step back for a second. Do we want to think in terms of, like, now that we've gone through one cycle of this, the staff capacity, time that we have, and how big the subset list we want to start at first, like the number of drugs and the number of insulin products that we want to review as kind of the first step, just so I know we felt very kind of rushed a little bit last year, and I know staff was working very, very hard to prepare all these things. So do we want to set a goal of saying, I don't know, X number of drugs and X number of insulin products from the get-go, and then use that to figure out how we want to prioritize this larger list?
I mean, yeah, I'm not against, setting a goal. I had, based on the hindsight of what we've learned the last few years, I did write down, I guess, some ideas that maybe, might be of interest to board members to just help us kind of narrow it. I've got a whole list. I could start reading some of them. I mean, one of them, I feel like even though we were leading into the data year that we were supposed to be looking at, as board members, we couldn't help but also take into consideration some market forces. So like one thing I personally was thinking of that would certainly impact a lot of them would be to remove the 2026 and the 2027, IPay list of drugs, or the MF MFP drugs, and then even the 2028 drugs will be announced in February. But from my perspective, those will be ones that we kind of know are going to have some considerable changes, and maybe that might be one of many ways to just to narrow the list. I have lots of other ideas, but obviously would like to see how other people would like to proceed. Oh, Michelle.
Thank you, Chair Bailey. I like your suggestion. I might also add, I'm thinking back to the 2025 annual report, and where we saw a significant amount of spend correlated with volume. And so is there an opportunity for us to try to delink that and identify high cost drugs that don't have that correlation with large prescription volume?
I think you are right. We definitely have that flexibility. I'm not sure if you were on the board when we made that decision, but that was just the lens we chose to use for that review cycle. We chose just strategically to look at drugs that impacted a high number of patients. But to your point, we could look at it completely different this year, right? So that we're trying to get at things from multiple perspectives. So I think that's a really good point. I mean, I have tons of other ideas, like possibly remove drugs that have had more than like a 50% WAC decrease, even from the 2024 data to what we know. And I guess maybe we can't do that if we don't have the forward-looking information. Drugs that already have a biologic on the market. It might be other ones. Do we want to only pick a certain number of drugs per therapeutic class? That is something I think that might come up. I don't want to dominate, but clearly I've listed. I spent a lot of. I was just trying to strategically think of how we might want to look at getting from point A to point B, or like as you're filtering, do we want to redo drugs that have already been reviewed, or just as a board, do we want to decide not to review drugs that have already been reviewed so that we're providing additional insights to legislators and Oregonians, for each year that we provide this information? I could go on and on, but those were just some of the things in my notes.
Thank you,
Mr. Kennedy.
I would vote that we continue to monitor those medications that were on our previous list, because if we're looking at medications that create an affordability problem, and they were an affordability problem in 2023, and they're still an affordability problem, then I think that deserves to be called out.
Any other board suggestions? Chris?
It's not necessarily a suggestion about ways to filter, but to Dr. Hartug's point earlier, I do think it would be helpful to have like an idea of what we want to as a group get to as far as the number, because I think what we just saw from Courtney is that we're going to be able to consider some orphan drugs this year that we didn't in the past. And that's that was a pretty big filter for us to go from a big list. Half of them almost go away when you filter out those orphan drugs. So that was an easy one to kind of say, okay, we're not going to consider the orphan drugs. But now that we are, I think there's the potential to have this really big list. So I wouldn't mind saying, we want to get it down to 15 drugs, or we want to get it down to 12 drugs as we go into the I don't know what that number is, but I think starting with that will help us know how many filters we need to add. So I appreciated that comment from Dr. Hartung.
Lori, I think your hand was raised first.
I appreciate having a goal to get to, but I think as we decide on the filters first, I think that we'll get down to a lower number and then we can go from there. And we eliminated the generics last year, and I would think that's a good idea for this year as well.
Mr. Murray?
I also am in support of everyone's comments about limiting down. I will be viewing it from a lens of patient cost and plan total expenditure. It doesn't matter to me whether it's one of the highest utilization drugs, if it still boils down to being expensive for the plan and for the patient, I'm going to include it. I'm not going to exclude it based, just because utilization is high and we have a big number there. I'm glad to see that we can review some orphan designated drugs as long as we can successfully tease apart the information to make a good decision. There's been comments in our public testimony or letters to us that there is concern that reviewing these orphan drugs will affect orphan drug availability for the orphan designated patients. I guess I need to hear more about what is the real world experience with actions that have been taken that have reduced cost, and has it resulted in lack of access for patients nationwide or in any particular state. So those are kind of my concerns. Not having generics in there, I don't think generics need to be in there personally. And what else? I do want to get down to a fewer number of drugs so it isn't quite so difficult on staff. And I think we can do that because we really, all of us, I believe, have refined what we're looking for and can bring a lower number to the group.
Vice Chair Dr. Hartung?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lot of my thoughts and comments are reflective of our experience last year. And, when I look at this list and I kind of sort them by various numbers and metrics here, kind of different drugs come out. And one thing from last year that I thought was really helpful was that, and I don't know if this is purposeful or if this just manifested by serendipity, but we had clusters of disease therapies that were present. Like we had 4 or so migraine therapies. We had a bunch of the GLP-1s in there as well. And I thought that was helpful in terms of thinking about them together and contrasting them. And I know we don't have to do that, but to Lori's point about making sure we have diversity of therapeutic areas, I think we can maybe do both in terms of just I see I think we had one dermatologic agent, immunologic dermatologic agent. And so maybe, with that one idea is we could just, have that as a focus this year, plus, a smattering of other ones. So again, just not a recommendation, but just a thought that kind of came up.
I know one way I was trying to filter when I was doing it, one column I was looking at was average cost. Let's see, average cost net of rebate per prescription. That was one filter I was just kind of starting from, at least in looking. And I know that average cost is broad, but Dr. Hartung?
I don't mean to interrupt you, and I
No, go
completely,
ahead. I just saw your hand. I saw your hand. So.
Okay, I completely agree. I mean, I did this, but there wasn't a spend per enrollee in the that I could see.
Correct. I saw it. I felt that was bundled.
So I just created one just because like the
I'm not smart enough to
thing,
do that. So good job.
I'm barely smart. So because that just, averages it over if they're dosed differently or whatever, just to get what the spend is per person over the year.
Thank you for adding a column like that. I wasn't that sophisticated, but that was one column I was at least starting to focus on.
And I think that's kind of what we did last year and then we also factored in like number of like if you do that, you get these very high spending immunologic and oncology drugs that, if you believe the numbers of enrollees, it's, sometimes it's fewer than 50 patients, which again, we're dealing with a subset of, people who are, I think it's I can't remember what the source data is for if it's inclusive. I don't think it's inclusive of the entire
I think our
insured
annual
population.
report, or maybe it was our quarterly thing that we just put out, said that our data represents about a quarter of Oregonians from the DPT. Is that staff? Is that a metric that's accurate that I pulled from those reports?
Yeah, because it just covers
Okay.
the 11 commercial carriers. And, again, so you're going to try to lean more into the APAC, which covers, Medicaid, Medicare, and commercial across all commercial carriers in the state, not just the 11 reporting one. So again,
But APAC's not net, right? I mean, that's the challenge.
it is not. That's why it creates that challenge. But like we did last year, we break it up into what the gross are into the subset list.
Oh, Dr. Hartung?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just, yeah, never mind. I don't have,
Yeah.
no comment.
This is a great conversation. Is there do you want me to drill down anything, for example? But I'll hit Lori and Chris up on their comments, and then we'll go to the next phase. So Lori, what do you suggest?
Well, I was going to mention removing the HIV medications because the funding mechanisms are such that hasn't changed.
That was on my list too.
And I think consistent with how we've done it in the past, right, Chair Bailey? I think we filtered those out historically.
Yeah, and I think that was just because our Oregon AIDS Drug Assistance Program pays premiums, and I think it used to be like 400% of FPL. I think it may have even went up from there. But Mr. Lemon, your hand is raised, so you have the floor.
Yeah, the other group, if we're going to talk specifically about things to filter out, I think in the past we filtered out the vaccines. And there's, I think, 13 vaccines on the list. Courtney, I had a separate question about I can see the generic drugs in there, but is there a way to easily filter out the generics without individually going in?
Should be. So it's here in column U.
Oh, brand or generic. Got it. I just missed that column.
Okay.
That's my bad. Thank you.
Or you can use the license application for ANDA, knowing that there's an ANDA and the NDA. So it depends on how you want to look at it. And toxoids was also removed last year. So it was antivirals, vaccines, and toxoids. So is that another concept the board? Yep. All right. Let's just see what that would look like if we just started it now. I don't know how much that hits, down to 119 drugs.
Could we remove generics? Some of
Yeah,
those.
if you take the generics out, it goes down to 29, Courtney.
So purely generics out.
Oh.
So a little bit more. Go down to 67 with the generics out. Do you have another filter on, Chris, on your list? That way.
Did you have one that was specific to HIV, or did you take out all the antivirals?
I took out all the antivirals, all the toxoids, and all the vaccines under the therapeutic class.
I must have something different on there then.
You can come up here and clear out your selection and it will reset and you can try again. All right, 67 has a huge drop, taking out generics. Any other, there was conversation last year that drugs that had generic equivalents were removed. So that'd be 13 if it already has, I mean, like some of these are only like 1, 2, and 3 equivalents, or 1, 2.
So we could just say multi-source generics. Oh, sorry, my hand's not up.
It's okay. Is that a filter you want me to apply? To remove? Since there's going to be market competition in some capacity.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see what it is.
I think multi-source, yeah.
56.
Chris, I see your hand is still raised. Did you have more filter you wanted, or I was gonna ask Michelle? I know
No,
she had her
I'll
hand
put
raised.
it down. Sorry, Chair Bailey, that's my
No,
fault.
you're fine. I just wanted to be mindful. So Michelle, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I was gonna, thank you, Chair Bailey. I was gonna ask Courtney if you can now just sort the file by the net spend per enrollee. I think it's column N. Just to see what that would give us.
What's going on here? Oh, I see. So
Because
don't know.
I did that and it without any of those filters,
Yeah.
and it filters all of those out.
The number is currently being stored as text, Courtney.
Yeah.
Which is why it's not filtering by size.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And while she's working on those formulas, did we have our discussion related to how we might want to view orphan? Because that is another column that we have the orphan solely, right? And then we have the orphan that have a multi designation. Is that something we want to talk about right now? So like, or do we just want to see where?
Before we go to that one, Chair Bailey, was the Medicare fair price a filter that we used last time?
I think ultimately it ended up falling that way, whether or not we filtered it that way. We must not have filtered it that way because some of my drugs that I proposed last time did end up still in our, so I don't know, maybe we went to that point eventually, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, so what happened was that there was an initial discussion to remove it, but just because there was a potential for it to come, have market, it was decided not to exclude it at the time, due to there wasn't certainty that there wasn't any showing thing. And it's also for a very small population. So it's only for the Medicare population that it really impacts, and not, commercial and primary commercial, because Medicaid has a whole different.
I mean, since we have voted, I mean, I will disclose, I mean, that was part of what I thought about when I was individually voting, right? So maybe we didn't use the filter, but I feel like the way the votes fell, we may have used the filter in our own hearts and minds.
All right, so say if I remove those out, that gives us 46.
And Mr. Lehman, your hand was raised before. I think I saw Mr. Murray's next. Oh, okay. Mr. Murray, your hand was raised. You have the floor.
Your comment about orphan drugs, if they have only one indication, should they be struck from the list, filtered out?
That's where I was heading with, did we want to have that discussion right now?
So as far as the data analysis, I think this is a great time to kind of provide some clarification. The ones with the one, that's easier for us to get in to find it specifically in our data set. Ones that actually have, 4, 6, that's going to be a lot of data cleaning for us. So actually it'd be like the reverse. If you really want to make it easy, remove the ones with the larger indication for the orphan designations, according to kind of like how the statute language reads and everything else, because then if you pull down the ones with ones, we can pull out those really quick, especially if they're like pediatrics and stuff like that.
Got it. Okay.
Also, I want to emphasize that staff only pulled the approved orphan designated indications on the FDA. This file doesn't have what non-orphan approved indications the FDA may have for those drugs, because that can be a long list.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the limitation of the FDA, the way the FDA presents the information, right?
True.
Dr. Hartung?
Yeah, 2 points. On the orphan consideration, I mean, if it's possible with this tool to eliminate drugs that have one indication that is an orphan designation, I think we should do that because we have to do that. I'm not sure if it's possible with this filtering mechanism, if that's possible. Like for instance, the CF drugs, if they have one indication for various types of CF and they don't have a non-orphan indication, then we can just eliminate those right out of the chute. But the other things, I'm not exactly sure how that would fall out with this particular tool. I mean, I think we can rely on our collective wisdom to, if people have some insight about like the different indications and like how many orphan indications out of the total indications, like some of the dermatologic drugs, which are clearly used for a lot of different non-rare conditions, but may also have some orphan indications. But I think that the parsing in at that level, I think should happen at the affordability review part, and maybe we don't need to try to engineer that out at this stage because it's a little bit crude here. So that's kind of the comment there is like, if we can exclude those with one indication as an orphan indication, let's do that. And then maybe the rest, if someone has some knowledge about the relative frequency of a certain drug and its orphan versus non-orphan indications, we can use that to make some case-by-case decisions. The second point I wanted to make was about the MFP. And in an analogous way, I don't feel like we should be excluding purely whether or not they're slated to be on the MFP as it rolls out in the next couple of years, because it's not clear how the dust is going to settle within that program and the trickle down effects to the commercial side. So my opinion is to not exclude purely on if they're slated to be in the MFP program now or in subsequent negotiation cycles.
Mr. Kennedy, I saw your hand was raised.
Yes, I just wanted to echo what Dr. Hartung was saying about anecdotal evidence, because I think with the orphan status drugs, we're also looking for off-label, right? So we're not just looking for indications, but we're also looking for off-label use. And I don't think we're going to get that data anywhere. So I think we're going to have to rely on individuals to talk about off-label.
Well, and I do hear what both of you are saying, and I wouldn't say I disagree in concept, but I do want to clarify. I think I heard the feedback from Courtney as reverse related to one-to-many designations. I think what I heard from Courtney was that when something has multiple, it's less likely we would be able to filter the data as we move forward than if it had one, or if it had, so the way at least I thought I heard, so Courtney, you could just I guess, re-clarify, because I heard it the opposite the way than how Vice Chair Dr. Hartung and Mr. Kennedy heard it.
Yeah, so
Or
like
Michelle.
Keytruda has, 10 indications. For us to have to go into the claims information and pull out each of these indications, that's going to be very, very challenging for staff to do. But if you have like, where is it? Skyrizi, here it has a treatment for pediatric Crohn's disease as one, we can pull that and you can look at it. And that's one of the drugs that's on the, top trends report. So, it's kind of looking at that nuance. It's like, just because it has one indication, that is more helpful for us to pull out versus 10 or 9 or so, because that's going to be a lot of work on Heather to do. And we don't even know, because a lot of it's at the claims level, and we don't, and all that would have to come through APAC. That's not necessarily, we have to kind of find a process for this being their first way through. So maybe in the future, we'll be able to add more orphan designation, designations, and kind of lean into what Dan are saying. But really, I think for this first go around, keeping it easy for us to see how the analysis presents itself through one orphan indication, maybe the most meaningful at this time. But yeah, I see Laura, your hand's up.
So because we're on the one hand, we're saying we want to get this to a smaller number, so we're not quite so overwhelmed in the review process. And because of just what you said, could we maybe eliminate orphan designations more than 2 to see how many of the medicines we end up getting rid of? And the other part was number of enrollees. I still feel like some of these medications, if there's 22 enrollees, that seems like we should think about eliminating it.
All right, so if I was to eliminate, and we're just looking at orphan designation drugs right now, because I removed it's just on a filter. So just for orphan designations, 2 to 1 is still looking at 28 drugs. So if I add back in just from that filter, oh, come on, don't do this. I lost my filter. We would have to go back to. So I thought I saw Dr. Hartung's hand up, so why I figure out where my filtering thing went amiss. Did you have some comments?
Well, I guess it's more of a process.
Okay.
Comment about, arranging this in some sort of sequencing the drugs by some sort of priority variable, either spend per enrollee or something like that. And then if we have a target number of drugs that we think we can review in a particular year, kind of maybe just do a little bit more manual process of kind of looking at each drug. And, like you mentioned, that Keytruda, which had, I don't know, 10 different orphan indications, and maybe we don't feel like we have the bandwidth to parse that out. But so we could just say, okay, that's too many. But maybe some of the other ones, maybe it might not be as difficult. Or we just look at that and we say, oh, it's probably pretty unlikely that these drugs with that much spend are going to be being used for these 3 designations. So I guess it's more of like, do we need to automatically just strip them out with the filter, and can we just look at it and make a informed decision about it? I guess that's less, it leaves a little bit more wiggle room or discretion on our part.
Mm-hmm. So I did filter, so if we're looking at 10, that's Keytruda, Quavar, Humira. I'm just seeing if any of these are on our. Um, I don't know if it makes that much of a difference because and these all had whack changes year over year. So you'd still want to keep these on, Dan, just to look at them?
So some of these, they're not in my wheelhouse of kind of clinical understanding. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and these are all concepts we can think about. Again, I just wanted to provide some examples of how to look at it, and then we can bring it back. I'll take all your suggestions and kind of create a more narrative process of the concepts. But I do want to give Heather enough time to be able to play with the insulin sheet with you guys as well. And we only have a half hour left of the meeting, but Chris, you want to?
So just to clarify, Courtney, it sounds like generics, we're all in agreement to filter out
Yeah.
antivirals, toxoids, and vaccines, and then the
Yeah.
rest are still kind of a work in progress. Is that what you took from that?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because we talked about a lot of different things, but that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, and then board members, as you spend the next couple weeks kind of conceptualizing what this process needs to look like, please let staff know ahead of time if there's anything else to kind of assist that up, or extra columns that you'd like, anything that's going to help your decision making through the process. So if there's nothing else regarding kind of this initial preliminary list review, I'm going to have Heather come back on. Let's stop sharing. And she will walk through your drill downs. There she is. All right, Heather.
Apologies, I'm having some technical difficulties. Give me just 1 second.
Do you want me to share my screen, Heather?
I think I can get it. Can you all see the insulin spreadsheet?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so looking at the NDC level here, is there any particular way the board would like to look at this?
Well, and I think this is an opportunity to remind the board that the last decision-making process was that you just selected all the glargine products, and that included generics and brand name drugs. So it was just, the whole one class of the products. I don't know if that was meaningful for you, or if you want to look at a little more deeper dive with some of these other drugs based off of
Yes, and
some other
and
avenue.
the insulin glargines were all long-acting insulins, and I believe that was the pivotal point for the board last year. But if there is a different point of view that the board would like to view either in the NDC or in the drug level, we can definitely drill that down at this point. We also have a number of therapeutic alternatives aside from insulin subclass to filter upon in this particular area, which is also listed here at the drug level.
I did want to ask, when you were showing this previously, it made me think, related to medical claims data versus pharmacy claims data. I feel like previous years we were struggling. Like, I think we kind of decided to lean in more to pharmacy claims data is my recollection of previous years. I guess that's just one piece that I wanted to, it doesn't have to be today, but talk to the board about for as we go through this for insulins. Like, is that because I know they're billed differently. I know the mechanism for how they're reimbursing things is different. So I just didn't know if we feel that's apples to apples and we want to do that, or maybe it's not important to anyone, but it was just something I thought about.
Totally a decision up to you
Yeah.
all, but I will give you a little bit of background for the medical. We did not have the means to pull that last year, but this year we do. It does not encompass the entirety of all medical claims. What it does include is those medical claims with an identifiable NDC included with them. And so these are keyed off of an NDC value. And so does it include all medical claims? No, it does not. It only includes those. And so if the board chooses to reduce and eliminate that, that is totally the board's choice. However, it's included here for your review, understanding that it is only inclusive of those with an NDC value attached to the claim.
Perfect. But it's, I mean, better than omitting it entirely. So that's why it's in the total pay or paid column.
Correct. So in this instance here, you have it broken out so you can see which one is associated with which type, but then here it's inclusive of the total of all claims.
Thank you very much. It's a nice enhancement to be able to have more of that information. So thank you.
Thank you. Would any of the board members in particular like to see a specific drill down, either by subclass or non-proprietary name or the number of therapeutic alternatives? Also in this drug level review is the number of NDCs associated with a specific drug. Additionally, if there's something that you are not seeing that you would like to see, if it is feasible, I will work to include that for you.
I mean, one of my initial thoughts on like looking at it was last year we kind of went into one and we wanted, we kind of looked at different ones within the subset. Part of me was like, okay, well, maybe this time we look at ones that have less therapeutic alternatives, but also have, a high total paid amount.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. That was just one lens I was looking at.
If we were to sort by total payer paid amount, which is inclusive of medical and pharmacy at this point, if we go from largest to smallest, the largest drug that you will see here based on that total payer paid is the Tresiba, followed by Lantus, Humalog, Basaglar, and Toujeo.
Yeah, I guess I was also wondering if the number of therapeutic alternatives, if lowering that made, I don't know, I was just kind of playing around with it. So,
yes, if we reduce that to those that only have 0 or 1 therapeutic alternatives, the list becomes markedly shorter with 13 records, focusing predominantly on Humulin and Novolin. We do know that from this list over here, when we look at Novolin in particular, we get that this was on the previous drug review, yes, and that there's no orphan designations, and we have that for Humulin. If we double check that, oops, it helps if you spell it correctly. And you look here, again, we do not have any orphan designation. So when we go back to this list, we have a mix of short and intermediate acting types of insulins. within these proprietary names that are listed. I see, John, that you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just have an off-the-wall lens that I'm probably going to try to look into in the next month. The patients that I see coming into the pharmacy, whether they be pediatric or adult, the new technologies that are out there and how the insulin is administered, and I'm not even going to specify which insulin it is, but I'm going to be curious to know what is the affordability of these newer technologies for patients that walk in the door and that are trying to get better control using this newer technology. So I will be kind of filtering from that lens. I can't even begin to apply it to the chart right now, but that's going to be my focus is what are my patients coming in for now? And are they affordable? And I'll be evaluating that based on data that I just have in my pharmacy and bringing it to this chart.
And Courtney, I might rely on you just a little bit for an answer, or not really an answer, but a statement to that. And this list is inclusive of only insulin. And so I would like to understand completely the insulin, or so the technologies that you're referring to, making sure that we're looking at insulin specifically.
Sure. No, I understand. The new technologies uses these insulins. So like I say, I'm just preliminarily thinking that, and so I have some work to do, Heather, to do my research. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Courtney, anything to add to that before I ask Michelle?
No, I kind of know what John's leaning into, but I don't want to speak out of context. So I'll let John lead that conversation when we come back next month.
Thank you. Michelle?
I'm questioning the therapeutic alternative designation for this list. Like U500, I would say I would agree with, but some of these others, like I'm questioning the values that are listed here.
Okay.
So when I filtered by the spend per enrollee, Afrezza rose to the top of the list, and it says there are 6 therapeutic alternatives. To my knowledge, there's only one inhaled insulin. Versus, Novolin R and Humulin R, I would consider therapeutic alternatives, but they only have one listed.
Correct. And that is how we have it in the current list. We did get the values for the number of therapeutic alternatives from our clinician. If there's something specific on any of these particular drugs that you would like us to go back and double check, we can do that. Courtney, is there anything you want to add to that in terms of the number of therapeutic alternatives provided here in the spreadsheet?
No, I didn't work much on this sheet, so my knowledge base for the TAs for insulins aren't as significant as the other list. But it is something to look into, and thank you, Michelle, for kind of flagging it. Just I'll take what you just said and go kind of do some additional research on if these are all matching up.
The way, my understanding of the way our clinical consultant was reviewing these was considering, for example, that the rapid acting insulins are all therapeutic alternatives to each other. So that's why, so Afrezza, inhaled Afrezza, rapid acting is grouped with other rapid acting drugs in that analysis. So it's not saying that the therapeutic alternatives are limited to inhaled insulins, but other rapid acting insulins too that might be administered by a different mode. That's certainly an area where different clinical judgments could categorize those differently. And for those of you on the board who have some expertise in this, please make suggestions about how we could better present the information for you.
I think that's an important distinction because from my perspective, that may have been what Mr. Murray was also leaning into, that the route of administration is different. And so newer technologies have like different routes of administration that are more convenient. So when we're thinking of a social determinants of health lens and our, vials with syringes, equivalent from a compliance and adherence perspective to a dial-a-dose insulin, like when he made that comment, that's where my mind was going. And I think that would not be reflected from the clinical lens that this information was presented as. And so he really got me thinking with that comment. And then with Michelle just kind of showing clearly an inhaled insulin is very different, at least from how someone can more easily use it than something else.
And I would encourage folks to use the NDC level spreadsheet if you want to dig in to the route of administration reported by FDA and some of those other criteria that frankly are easier for us to compile at the NDC level, just given the way the FDA data are reported and accessed.
Thank you for that, Sarah and Shelley. Are there any other questions, or would you like to drill down the NDC level list in any particular fashion? Okay. Well, Courtney, without any further questions or requests for drill down, I'll pass it back to you.
Yes, thanks, Heather. And again, we really appreciate all your conversation and call outs. And as you start utilizing these spreadsheets, please let us know, because we're in the process of trying to set up the dashboard to create those visualizations to help kind of with decision making. And we want this to be as meaningful and as accurate as possible. And so please let us know sooner than later what improvements that we need to focus on before the next board meeting. And I guess with that, if there's no other conversations regarding the insulin drug list or the prescription drug preliminary list, I just have to say congratulations on getting your first votes down, and we'll start working on that report write-up and submit it to you and draft for next month for you to approve in March. So have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next month. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Courtney. So I would like to reference that the next board meeting for the record is Wednesday, February 18th, 2026 at 8 a.m. Pacific. So with there being no further business before the board, all in favor of adjourning the board meeting, please say yes.
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 And any opposed, please say no. All right, we'll see you next month on Wednesday, February 18th, 2026 at 8 a.m. Thank you.